जय श्री राम कृष्ण।
जय श्री राम। Namaskar to all of you. Jai Shri Ram Krishna Namo Narayana.
Jai Shri Ramakrishna Maharaj.
We shall begin the session with the prayer. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Welcome to the discussion on the Great Master Sri Ramakrishna, Leela Prasanga, written by Shardanandaji Maharaj. In the introduction, Shardanandaji Maharaj was discussing about attitude of a sadhaka in incarnation, attitude of a spiritual aspirant in divine incarnation. Now, in this introduction to the life of a sadhaka, a spiritual aspirant, we are all spiritual aspirants, mumukshus. We all aspire, we are all aspiring for liberation or realizing God. So there are many practical hints whereby we can learn so much how to go forward in spiritual life, how to do the sadhana, what is real sadhana. So now here, a very complex problem is being discussed, a very, very complex problem. that is of our mind. The most toughest thing which to conquer or to get into control is this mind. So about that here, Sharadanandaji Maharaj is now going to explain about that mind, the nature of the mind, and then the hints and other things which Ramakrishna used to give them to control the mind, and how you can do sadhana, take the help of that mind and do spiritual sadhana. Now, Sharadanandaji Maharaj is telling anyone who has tried to know even a little of the nature of the human mind can see that beginning from the gross, stula, in Sanskrit it is called stula, gross. There exists in it many strata of desires. There exists in the mind, beginning from the gross, is found that there are many strata of desires, different planes of desires, so many desires. Subtle. So in that desire also, the desires are subtle, subtler, and still more subtle. What are the different stratas of desire? Subtle, subtler, and still more subtle. If you are somehow able to go beyond one, another comes and obstructs your path. And when you conquer the latter, still another takes its place. When you have left the gross ones behind, the subtle ones comes and opposes you. If you give up the allurement of lust, sex, that of gold, that is greed, arises in its stead. If you refrain from indulging in both in a gross way, attachment to outward beauty, desire for name and fame, and the like come to you. So like that, there are so many different desires and strata of desires too. As you go on conquering or removing one, another will come up and trouble you and become prominent. So it's a constant fight between these desires and my mind to control the mind, to take control of it. Rather, they will be taking control of us and putting us into trouble. Or if by force you circumvent all attachments, they once again manifest surreptitiously as pseudo retirement from activities or as pseudo sympathy for others. So it will come to fool you. These desires will take different form. Now, you know that in the gross form, you are going to put them away. So the mind is so cunning and clever that it will bring up these desires in a way that it will deceive you. You have so many other weaknesses in you. So just like it will come surreptitiously, it will manifest surreptitiously in the form of pseudo retirement from activities. So it will take up, you have to be active all the time. Even at the last breath, you should be doing your sadhanas. Swami Brahmanandaji Maharaj, the spiritual son of Sri Ramakrishna, used to tell, do not give up hope that you will realize God. This very second, this very moment, do not give up hope. Be trying until you give up your breath, the last breath, the hope to realize God. Whatever might be all the difficulties, have that hope to realize God until your last breath. That is the advice of Swami Brahmanandaji. Don't give up. So now this desire, the mind will try to deceive you, and it will come in the form of pseudo retirement from activities. It will quote, the mind will quote from the scriptures telling that you should not do these activities. The scriptures have told that you should not do activities. So just like the devil quoting the scriptures, it will surreptitiously manifest as pseudo retirement from activities. So here, by these words, Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling that you should never give up doing sadhana. Even after realization, as Lord Krishna tells in the Bhagavad Gita, you should note that in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells that you should never give up karma yoga. You should be doing. Though it may be not for, see, most of the karmas are done to fulfill our desires. But after you realize God, or when you go to a very high state, you have to continue doing the karma yoga just to keep yourself as an ideal to the world. So many people will be following you, so many people will be looking at you. Then if you retire, then if you don't do all those things, then the other people will start thinking that when those people who are at the helm of the affairs are given up, why should I continue? Let me stop everything and keep quiet. So they will take the wrong example and the whole generation will be spoiled because of your wrong decisions, or you are stopping the karma. So karma yoga, even by the sadhaka who has already attained, he has nothing to attain, but still they will be working. Krishna gives the example in Bhagavad Gita of Janaka. Janaka was a perfect realized soul. Janaka, the father of Mother Sita, was a gnani. He was a realized soul. He has realized Brahman. He had no attachment at all, but still he used to work, he used to do karma yoga. Why? To set an example to other people. After the rainy season, it would be Janaka who would be the first person to go with the plow to farm the land, though he was the king, though he was the king of the Janakapuri, Videha Raja. So it is bordering Nepal and India. You can tell that it is now in Nepal. At that time, it was all one undivided India, Bharata. So Janaka used to be the first person to go with the plow and start plowing the land, just like an ordinary farmer. Why? To set an example to other people, his people there, his subjects, that you should do the work properly. You should never give up. You should not be lazy. So he would be doing the work. That is the time when he was plowing, that he got Mother Sita in a box. A box was in the earth. So when he was plowing, it got stuck. The plow share got stuck to that box. And when that box was opened, he saw to his surprise that there was Mother Sita in it, the baby Sita in it. So he took up and read that as a daughter. So Mother Sita was God. That's why the name, one of the names of Sita will come in that way. Janaka, because he's the daughter of Janaka, she got the name Janaki. Mother Sita's another name is Janaki. So there the example of this Janaka is given by Lord Krishna, that see, Janaka, even though he was a king, he had realized Brahman, nothing more to realize, he had the highest knowledge. Even Vyasa Maharshi, the great Rishi, sent his son Shuka. You know, Shuka was even born realized, but he sent Shuka to be the disciple of this great king Janaka, because he was a knower of Brahman. But even he, Krishna tells that he never gave up his work. Even after realization, up to the end, he was doing the karma yoga, he used to be working, so that they should be setting an example to other people. So then Lord Krishna gives that shloka in that chapter. Yad yad acharati shreshtaha tat tat devetaro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anuvartate. Whatever the elders, the father and mother, or the people who are leading, they perform, the other people, the subjects, the younger ones will follow them. They will not hear what they tell, but they will do what they do. That's why you have to be always performing karma yoga actions, but you need not take the result of it. You can give it to other people, or you can offer it to the Lord as an offering to the Lord. You can do that. So Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita, even after realization, you should be working, you should be doing sadhana, so that other people will not be misled. So that's why here, even before getting the realization, So this mind will try to deceive you in so many ways. It will tell you, oh, the scriptures have told that you should not, as a sannyasin, you should not touch the Agni, you should not cook, you should not do havans, you should not do homa. So it will wrongly quote the scriptures. So that's why Krishna has made it clear in Bhagavad Gita. So you have to follow Bhagavad Gita as the right scripture. You will not be confused. Everything is so clear. So here, Shardanandaji Maharaj is warning us how the mind can deceive us, telling so many, quoting so many things and telling the words of this some great people wrongly. Out of context, it will quote and it will try to deceive you. So that's what Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, that by force you circumvent all attachments. You might have already gone very near to realization. Then once again, the mind will manifest surreptitiously. All this desire of the mind will manifest to you surreptitiously as pseudo retirement from activities or as pseudo sympathy for others. So, in the name of, we have seen many people, sadhakas, falling down. They will develop pseudo sympathy. Oh, they are in difficulty, so we have to go and help them, give up all these things, go and help them, and then get into the problem, fall into the Maya, and finish. They are finished. So many such things have happened. We have seen in our own life. So again, what does it come in the form of? Pseudo sympathy for others. Yes, sympathy is good. It is not sympathy, it is empathy. Seeing God in them, to serve them. But this comes, the desire will come to you in the form of pseudo sympathy for others, and it will trouble you and it will drag you down. So you should be very, very careful about these desires and the mind. So that's why now Sharadanandaji Maharaj has given us all the warning how careful you should be, because the mind, your own mind, if trained properly, is your friend, mitra. Mana eva mitra, mana eva shatru. The mind itself can become your enemy if you are not properly trained it. Untrained mind can become your enemy. That's why it's very, very difficult here if you don't train it. So that's, if you are under the care of your guru, if you are under care of the Lord, and if you have a lot of devotion, nothing to fear. But at the same time, you should not be negligent, so that our mind will not be, or we will not be caught unawares, deceived. So that's why Shardanandaji is giving us so many warnings so that we can be alert, nothing to be afraid of. You've been initiated, you have the protection of the Guru, the Ishtadeta, then mother has told, what is that? Whenever you are in fear, always remember, my child, you have a mother behind you. So then she will come and protect you, nothing to worry. But at the same time, you should be careful. The master now, Shardanandaji told us about the treacherous nature of the mind to deceive us, not allow us to do sadhana, quoting so many, even the scriptures, and telling the words of some elders and the saints and sages are quoting out of context. So it will try to deceive you. So how it troubles you, the mind, the desires will come up and try to deceive you. Shardanandaji took us through that. Now, Shardanandaji is taking us through the words of Ramakrishna himself. Ramakrishna himself is warning us to be careful about these desires. So now what does Sri Ramakrishna tells in this introduction? The master spoke of this treacherous nature of the mind and always warned us to shun the net of desires. Now Ramakrishna himself is telling, he spoke of this treacherous nature of the mind and always warned us to shun the net of desires. In order to carry conviction to us, Ramakrishna would sometimes cite example. What are the examples he cited? Sometimes Ramakrishna would cite examples from his own life of how he thought and acted under similar circumstances. So if you give your own example from the life, it will be more meaningful and it will be more directly going to our heart. So to help us, Sri Ramakrishna is now citing example from his own life. What are those examples? Let us see. So, and he narrated them repeatedly to all these direct disciples and other householder disciples who used to come to him in Dakshineshwar. Ramakrishna used to narrate those examples. So, and he narrated them repeatedly, not once or twice, repeatedly. And to all the women devotees too, not only men devotees. because not the men only are the aspirants, spiritual aspirants, women are more in number, spiritual aspirants. So if the woman would come, he used to warn them in a different way. The men would be there as devotees, then he would warn them in a different way. Narrated to them repeatedly, even to all the women devotees too, as he did to the men, and kindle. So what for? Why to give up be careful of the desires? Why to be careful about this deceptive mind? The aim is to kindle the love of God. That's very important. These things are okay, you need it, but you should not be afraid and be sitting with that, what will the mind do? What will the mind do? So will it deceive me in this way? Don't go on worrying about that thing. What is the main thing here? What for all this thing is done? It is done to kindle the love of God. Why are those things to be taken care of? So that it may disturb my love of God, my bhakti, my devotion to God. The mind may deceive me, telling that, oh, God has given me trouble. God has not fulfilled my desires. He gave me so many, the Lord gave me so many difficulties in my life. So many happenings happened. So I will hate God. I will give up God. I will not think of Him. I will not love God. I will give up my love. So in this way, our mind will try to deceive us and take away my love of God, devotion to God. So don't be trapped by the mind. So whatever you do, don't give up that love of God, whatever might be. You may be squeezed, you may be crushed by all the difficulties in life. Never mind. Don't give up that love of God, devotion to God. So that's what here Sri Ramakrishna is telling. I have told you the example of Rabia Ladabia, one of the saints, a lady saint in Iraq. She was a Sufi saint, Rabia Ladabia. You should see how devoted she was to God. She was considered a saint in that area, in that country. Many people used to come to her advice. She lived an ordinary householder's life. So she used to do the cooking. She used to look after the household, cook for take care of the house and help in the farming. Ordinary householder's life. But she was a great devotee of God. She used to love God with so much of devotion, do all His service. Now, the husband has gone to the farm. There were two children, young children who had grown to their youth, maybe to the age of something like 18 and 20. So both the children had gone to the farm, to another part of the farm. So there was rain and lightning, and the lightning struck, and both the children got electrocuted, or they died out of that lightning. You know, it's high, very powerful electricity. So they died because of that lightning. So the two bodies of her children who had grown up to the age of youth were brought to the house. All the neighbors and the relatives were crying. And now Rabia Ladabia, the mother, was cooking. As soon as she got the news and saw the dead body of her own children, you can imagine what will be the position of a mother, whatever might be the greatness of her. Now calmly, she received everything. She had a lot of pain in that, but received that body, kept there. She told all the other relatives and the neighbors not to worry, not to cry, because she wanted now to prepare her husband for that death. He might be shocked. She's not worried about herself. She wanted to prepare her husband for this death. So she told, please place these bodies of my children in another room and lock it. And I will prepare myself and my husband for this death. She told very calmly. She placed those bodies in another room and then waited for the husband. She was cooking normally. Everything is normal. Husband came in the evening to the house. Now when he came, this great lady, the saint Rabia Ladabia, started asking him questions. My dear husband, I am now in a problem. What is that? They call you a saint. You too have a problem. What is your problem? You have to solve the problem. I have to solve your problem. So many people from all different parts of the country, they come here to you to get their problem solved, and you want me to solve your problem. Okay, tell what is the problem. See, long year back, maybe something like 18 or 20 years back, neighbor of ours was going to the pilgrimage. So he had given two ornaments, very, very costly ornaments, jewels, to me to keep safekeeping, for safekeeping, because he's going to a long pilgrimage, he's very old. And if he carries all those things or if he keeps in the house, it may be stolen. So you keep it, there is safekeeping. So after the pilgrimage, if I return back, you can give that to me back, return it back to me. Or else you can keep it for yourself. If I don't return because it's a long pilgrimage and it's a dangerous pilgrimage, when we go to the pilgrimage, the thieves and other people may attack us, or there may be so many other accidents, so I may die. I'm already very old. So if I don't come back, you can keep those ornaments, jewels. But if I come back, you can return back the jewels. So I agreed and I kept those two jewels. And now, recently, now that old man who had gone to the pilgrimage after 20 years has come back. It is asking me to return back those jewels, the ornaments. So now keeping that jewels with me, two jewels with me for many, many years, 20 years, 18 years, I've got attachment to those jewels. Now I'm feeling very dejected or very reluctant to return it back to the owner, to that old man who has come. So what shall I do now? What am I going to do? So I wanted to take your advice. Then the husband got upset. What is this? They call you a saint. How can they call you a saint? This is a very ordinary thing. I'm not a saint, but I can easily infer that, telling that it has to be returned to the rightful owner. This is not something very high spiritual. So it is his objects, it's his jewel, and you have to return it quickly back. What is there for you to decide? Why should you be reluctant? Give it back. Who? How do these people call you a saint? Why can't you return that back quickly? Then the great saint Rabbi Aladabir told, yes, come. I'm just waiting so that both of us will return back those two jewels to the rightful owner. Then she opened the door where the dead bodies of their children were lying, told the Lord had given these children for safekeeping, to protect and bring them up, safekeeping, nicely protect his jewels. So all the children are the children of God. They come to our house only for us to look after them and safekeep for the Lord. They are the Lord. Everyone is Lord's children. They're not our children. They are the Lord's children. The Lord has given us for keeping and looking after them for his sake, for his. They are his children. We have to look after him. They are not our children. So now the Lord is asking us to give it back to them. His own jewels, he wants to get it back. Now both of us, we will offer that jewels to the Lord. Come. Took the husband and showed the dead body of the children. Now the husband was prepared very well, but he was taken aback. He asked, how? Okay, I'm a father. I can understand. It will be less painful to the father compared to the mother. You are a mother. And how could you withstand that pain? And you are so calmly prepared me for that, for the pain. What a wonderful, great mother you are. Really, you are the saint. Really, you are the saint. How could you? And all the people, neighbors also praised her. How could you withstand that problem? Then the statement of that great lady, the saint, was, if you have faith in God, no difficulty is a difficulty. Any difficulty may be there. Your intense faith in God, your faith in God can protect you from any difficulty. So faith in God. Have faith in God. And one more thing you have to know, which is wrongly taught to us by our parents and elders, telling that all the difficulties and other things are coming. And it is all those problems are, the Lord is trying to punish you with the difficulties. Never. The Lord will never give us difficulties. All the difficulties which we are facing, all the troubles which we are getting is due to our own karmas. I am responsible for my difficulties. All the troubles I have faced from my childhood up till now is because of my bad karmas. Whatever I do will come back to me. The Lord has given freedom. Choose the right thing, you get the right result. Choose the wrong thing, you get the wrong result. That's all. I am responsible for all the things which I face in life. Take up the responsibility, Swami Vivekananda tells. You are responsible for all the difficulties and the good things in your life. But then what is the place of God? God is always neutral, the witness. So when you are in trouble, when you take recourse to God's feet and surrender to him, his only duty is to help you to come out of the difficulty. He never the Lord will never give us troubles. How can He give trouble to us? He's our soul of souls. He's our father and mother. He's the indweller. How can He give difficulty? It is our own karmas which is giving us difficulty. So that's why Swami Vivekananda tells, take up the responsibility. Whatever may be your condition in life, it is you. So you can overcome that. If you are responsible for the difficulties, then you can overcome that. Nobody else can do that. But if you take recourse to God, pray to God, have faith in God, those difficulties will vanish in a trice. He will remove that. So you come to know what is the place of God. So never teach your children, because to just as a mode of laziness, what will the father and mother do? Tell that, oh, if you do the mistake, if you don't obey me, then the Lord will punish you. You'll get all punishment. The God will give you all the difficulties and punish you. So the children will start thinking that God is giving the punishment. Not at all. We deserve anything, whatever we get. It is our own karmic deeds which are coming back. So why will God trouble you? Doesn't He have any other work to do? Has He to trouble you or give you into difficulty, give you difficulties? Not at all. It's our karmas which are coming. So do good karmas, you can remove it. It's in your own hand. Then instead of doing that, blame somebody, blame fate, blame God, blame the politicians, blame the teachers, blame the school, blame the environments, blame the father and mother. Wrong thing. I am responsible for whatever I am. For all the difficulties and the good things, I am responsible. Take up the responsibility. Then what to do? It's in your hand. You can overcome it. By your self-effort, you can overcome it. There is a solution for every problem. But it can be done very quickly if you take recourse to God, have faith in God. That's very, very important. So now, here, Ramakrishna is telling you, both men and women devotees. What is he telling? He narrated to them repeatedly, to all the women devotees too, as he did to the men, and kindled the love of God in their hearts. That is very, very important. The love of God should be progressing, it should be increasing. So you can see, even whatever difficulties, Rabia al-Adabiya, she has not studied Veda, she has not studied Bhagavad Gita, she had not studied Bhagavata, ordinary woman, village woman. How could she get so much of faith in God? And we, Hindus, we are getting everything, the love of Krishna everywhere, the love of Lord Shiva, Shiva Purana, so many Puranas, so many this thing. If you don't develop faith in God, that love of God should increase, it should never decrease. So, all the things you are doing, control of mind, everything is, what is the goal to achieve? To kindle love for God. That's more important. See, we do upavas, we do fasting. What for? What is the name of upavas? What is meant by upavas? Upavasa means living near God. Upa means near. God means, vasa means to live. So it is not starvation, giving up food. Yeah, you have to give up food. Why? To think more of God. Because if you eat too much, then you become sloppy or slow and lazy, and your indriyas will become sleepy. And you can't think of God, meditate on God. Or it may become too rajasic to rush here and there for more desires. That's why when you give up food, then your indriyas, the senses and the mind will become a little weak. Then they will not rush here and there. Then with that, you can concentrate on God. So upavasa, starvation, everything in our scripture, it is guiding you towards love of God. Upavasa, to live near God. So God is the goal. That's very, very important. So you should know that. So Ramakrishna is also telling, why should you control the mind? Why should you do all these things, sadhana? To kindle the love of God in their hearts. The following incident will make this clear. So you should know what is the goal. Should never forget that. So if you forget, then you will think, what is this, so much of hardship, all those things, what is the control of mind, why should I do that? So it is just only to kindle love for God. So your love for God should increase. That is the aim, that is the goal. Man or woman, whoever went to the master, felt so much attracted to in their heart of hearts by his amiability, courtesy, and his extraordinary love, without the slightest contamination of selfish motives. So Ramakrishna's love to the people who used to come to him didn't have even the slightest tinge, contamination of selfish motive, nothing in gain, not for any gain. It was just outpouring of his love, that compassion to other people, that's all. He didn't want anything in return. It was pure love, uncontaminated love, extraordinary love to every living being, without the slightest contamination of selfish motives. That's why that they became impelled to seek his blessed company again and again. Why would people get attracted? Because he used to show that love which is not at all contaminated by selfish desires. It is purely for others, to do good to others. It's nothing other thing. Just do purely good to others. Welfare. His only thought was welfare of others, good of others. That's all. Nothing in gain. Other people you can see, if you go study your mind when you are trying to help others, you'll always be thinking, what shall I get out of him? What am I going to get? You'll be expecting at least a word of thanks from him. Oh, he didn't. You help somebody and they tell, oh, he didn't even look at me. He didn't even thank me. Even the children in the house, they are trained in such a way to think that if the mother doesn't thank the child will be angry. 2 days she will be not talking to the mother because I did something, a small chore, I kept that broom or something in that place. My mother told me, and she'll be expecting thanks. It happened while Revered Ranganathanandaji Maharaj was in Europe. I forget which country. Ranganathanandaji Maharaj was telling that he saw the daughter was very upset with the mother because she helped the mother in some small work, and the mother forgot to tell the thanks. The daughter got upset and she was not talking and she's angry on the mother. Then Revered Ranganathanandaji Maharaj was there. Then he enlightened the child. My dear child, how much did you thank your mother? Thank your mother for keeping you in the womb for 9 months and suffering so much for your sake. How much did you thank your mother when she looked after you, when you were so helpless as a child, took care until you started walking and depending upon yourself? How much did you thank for all the work your mother has done until now? Have you sufficiently thanked your mother for all these things? And you expect a thank for one small job which she has given to you? Then that girl was alerted. She came to know what is the value of the mother. So that's the way Ranganathanandaji Maharaj taught her, that child. So we are taught in that way in India. But here in the Western countries, they teach the children otherwise. So the child will be expecting thanks even from the father and mother. What have they done? What so much of they have done? You cannot thank sufficiently. You cannot remove the debt which you owe to your father and mother. And you expect thanks from your father and mother. So, but here you can see nothing in return. That is the pure, unsullied love of Sri Ramakrishna. Nothing in return. He would do and do and do. Because of that, people would get attracted to him. So anybody going to Sri Ramakrishna, they would feel he loves him the most. Everybody would think that Ramakrishna is loving me the most. Everybody who comes to Ramakrishna. Why? Because no slightest tinge of selfishness. It's purely out of love to the living being. Nothing more, nothing in want. At least the father and mother, there may be a slightest selfish tinge that he is my child, so I show him love and affection. And if it is another baby, the same mother who is so much lovable to that child may not be so to another child who is born in the other mother's womb. Or they may, father and mother also may be having little selfishness that the child may look after me in my old age or give me something when it is needed. When I'm sick, my child may look after me. That selfishness may be there. But Ramakrishna didn't have even the slightest tinge, slightest contamination of selfish motive when he used to give them, pour that love and give them spirituality. So that's why all the people who used to go to Ramakrishna would get attracted, become impelled to seek his blessed company again and again. Whenever there was an opportunity, not only did they themselves visit him again and again, but they also took with them all their acquaintances. They are getting so much of joy in the company of Sri Ramakrishna, so they wanted that all their acquaintances, their children, their wife, their husbands, their father and mother, all their relatives, they should also let them get that pure love, that joy in meeting Sri Ramakrishna, so as to take them. So they took with them all their acquaintances so that they too might enjoy pure bliss in his company. One afternoon, one of our acquaintances went to the master at Dakshineshwar with her stepsister and a sister of the latter's husband. They saluted him, that is doing the namaskar when they see a great soul. They do, the Indian custom is to touch his feet or do pranams at his feet. They saluted him and took their seats. The master then inquired about their welfare and started a conversation which brought them to the topic that the only aim of human life is the practice of loving devotion to God. So that was the topic of discussion that day when these people were there, that acquaintance was there. They saluted him and took their seat. The master then inquired about their welfare and started a conversation which brought them to the topic that the only aim of life is the practice of loving devotion to God. Can one, Ramakrishna continued, easily take refuge in the Divine Lord? Inscrutable are the ways of Mahamaya, the seductress Mahamaya. Inscrutable are the ways. She will tempt us, take our mind away from we taking refuge in the Divine Lord. Does she allow this to happen? She makes one who has no relative in the world. Suppose you may not be having any relative in the world. So even to such a person, does she allow this to happen to get real love for God? She makes one who has no relative in the world rear a cat or a dog and live a worldly life. She will create attachment in that person, even if she doesn't have any relatives. So the Mahamaya will make you get attached to a cat or a dog or a cow or some other animal and make you forget God. So Maya will come, attachment will come in so many forms. She will allure you, delude you. So somehow you will get attachment. Does she allow this to happen? She makes one who has no relative in the world rear a cat and live a worldly life. One then goes round to procure milk for the cat and say, what can I do? The cat does not take anything but fish and milk. So I have to do all those things. So you get attached and you go on doing all those things and forget the development of devotion to God. Perhaps one comes of a rich and noble family. The husband and children have all died. Those who are left behind are so many widows, lingering as if there to be no death for them. Some parts of the house are falling to pieces. Others have already given way. Saplings of banyan tree and some greens like spinach have grown on the roof. The widows gather the spinach for curry and go on with their worldly life. But why? Why do they not take refuge in the Divine Lord? Why do they not do sadhanas and try to realize God? Even though they don't have anybody, any attachment in this worldly life, they still develop some attachment to some people or some animals or some objects and just forget God. Why is it? It is indeed the time for them to do so, but they will not. Why? Because the mind, your own ego will create so many impediments in the form of desires and it will not allow you. Sri Ramakrishna is telling them. Again, perhaps one loses one's husband soon after one's marriage and become a child widow. She is now a childless, grown-up widow. Why does she not call on God? But that she will not do. She becomes the guardian of her brother's household with her hair tied up in a knot and her key bunch hanging from the end of her cloth. She moves about with arrogance, commanding all. At the sight of her, the neighbors run away to avoid her malevolent presence. And she goes about saying, My brother cannot have even a meal if I am not here. Do you know who I am? My brother and my family cannot live even without me. He has to depend on me. Do you know who I am? So even the neighbors will be running away from her because of her, to avoid her malevolent presence. Ah, that wretch of a woman. Why does she not look at what has happened to her? What, after all, has she gained for herself? Instead of thinking of God and dedicating her life to God, she has forgotten everything and given her life to these worldly things. And then she has become arrogant and ego. Ramakrishna is giving this example and telling them, well, there was a peculiar coincidence here. What was that peculiar coincidence? The third lady of the party who was meeting the master that day for the first time was one of this type of woman guardians of their brothers. So somehow Ramakrishna didn't know anything. That was the first time they have come. Somehow Ramakrishna could know. What somehow Ramakrishna could know? Everybody's life, past, future, present, everything in their mind. So as if he's telling her own life, that lady's life, Ramakrishna is telling that. So the third lady of the party who was meeting the master that day for the first time was one of this type of woman guardians of their brother's household. Nobody had told the master of it before, but in the course of conversation, the master referred to that example and began to explain the powerful influences of desires and about the existence of endless strata of desires in human minds. Needless to say, these words entered deep into the heart of that lady. Hearing of the examples, the sister of the lady of our acquaintance nudged her and whispered, Sister, just fancy that such words should come out of the master's lips today of all the days. How will my sister-in-law take these words? To this, our acquaintance replied, What can we do about it? It is his pleasure. Nobody tutored him. It becomes very clear from a study of human nature that the higher a man's mind ascends, the more intensely do the subtle desires pain him. What is Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling? The higher and higher you go in spiritual life, it becomes very clear from a study of the human nature that the higher a man's mind ascends, the more intense do the subtle desires pain him. One who has committed thefts, uttered falsehoods, or indulged in licentiousness innumerable times is not much pained by repeating those actions. But an honest and high-minded man considers himself guilty and becomes distressed even at the thought of such things. Although incarnations of God are often seen to refrain from gross worldly enjoyments all their lives, they too have to fight with the subtle desires of their minds, but with one difference. Unlike our hardened minds, their pure and sensitive minds feel, as testified by themselves, a terrible anguish, 100-fold more intense than ours at the slightest awakening of these subtle desires within. How can we therefore regard their struggles to withdraw their senses from sights, tastes, and other sense faculties as feigned? So even the great incarnations also have to undergo these temptations and come out of it. For us, those things may be giving very small difficulty. But for these people, divine incarnation, even the slightest, the smallest of desires will pain them a lot. Just like you can get the example, suppose there is a dirty linen, lot of dirt on that cloth, so much of dirt, so much of dots, so much of marks. So now if you put one more dot, one more dirt on that cloth, it doesn't make any difference. But suppose take a very clean, white, very bright cloth and put very small black dot on it, a dot, any colored dot on it. That looks very prominent. Likewise, a pure mind of the Avatar Purusha, very pure. Even the slightest and the smallest of desire will cause great pain in their heart. So for us who have been inundated with so much of desires and so many wrongdoings, another one thing will not cause so much of pain. It may cause us pain, but not to the extent of an avatar Purusha. So avatar Purusha, even if a smallest desire come up in mind and troubles him, that will be a great pain. So now we shall stop the discussion about the sadhaka and sadhana. We'll go to the proper life of Sri Ramakrishna. So to keep all these things in mind, the introduction whereby what is sadhana, what is sadhaka, why should we control this mind to develop the love of God, to develop the faith in God, that is more important. Whatever may be the difficulties in your life, whatever may be the happenings in your life, even until the last breath of your life, you have to think of God, realizing God. You should never give up the hope that I will realize God in this life. Never give up the hope. Be continuing, be continuing. Even the last breath, even when you are just about to die, don't give up that idea to realize God. So that is the important aim of life. So that is what through the discussion we have come to know. Whatever might be the difficulty, do not lose faith. Okay. Now we shall come to the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And in that, what is the life chapter? The name of the chapter, Sadhana and Divine Inebriation. The life of Sri Ramakrishna is doing now the sadhana, the spiritual practices. And by that, he is getting divine inebriation. He's getting intoxication by the joy. He's getting by the experience and darshan, the vision of the Lord, the Ishtadevata. Sadhana and divine inebriation. Before long, the constant company of the Divine Mother brought him to such a state of blissful exaltation of the spirit that it was no longer possible for him to perform the daily and occasional services of the temple. The master used to give an example of how, with the spiritual progress of an aspirant, the actions enjoined on him by the scriptures drop off by themselves. We are supposed to do so much of work: karma yoga, sadhana, japa, havan, puja, service of your parents, service of your children, everything. So much of duties are there. For a spiritual aspirant, that you have to do so many duties, you cannot give up all those things. But when you progress in spiritual life, you don't want to give up them, but it drops off naturally as your work becomes intense. Don't give up work and duties forcibly. But when your devotion to Lord increases, you go nearer and nearer to God, it will naturally follow. Ramakrishna used to give the example of the coconut tree. You can see the coconut leaf. You should not forcibly cut off the leaf, then there will be wound for the tree. Instead, when it dries up, the coconut leaf, will fall off automatically. You need not pull it down. It will fall off automatically. Likewise, from our life, when your devotion has increased, when you are going too near to the God, then whatever the things have to fall off, the works and duties, it will fall off automatically. You need not forcibly do it. One more example given by Ramakrishna about this is, suppose you have a wound on your leg or on your hand. So then the skin, the wound, the abrasion or the sore now is gradually healing and the skin is coming up. So you can see that dried skin will be there on that wound or the sore. So the dry skin will be always itching. You feel that you should itch or remove that skin. So your mind will be restless to remove that. So as it is healing, you get that restlessness, you remove it, and again there will be bleeding, and again the wound will be raw. And again you have to put the medicine, and again it has to dry up. Again the same itching, again you do that. It goes on endlessly. But if you just keep quiet, withstand the itching, just keep quiet. Naturally, that dried skin will fall off and your skin will be coming up there. It will be healed up. But we can't keep quiet. We'll be doing something. We want the itching. We cannot withstand the itching. We just remove that dried skin, and again that becomes raw. It starts bleeding, and again the wound is coming up. That's why here Ramakrishna is giving the example in the sadhana too, in your spiritual life. Don't give up your karmas, whatever you are doing every day. Worship of God, serving, doing the sweeping, mopping, doing all your duties, everything, go on doing. As your spiritual life goes deeper and deeper, and when you are going nearer to God, gradually, without even you knowing, they will drop off. It will be a natural process. So let it happen. The Lord will do it. Don't worry about giving up. Never think of giving up any job. As your intensity to the spiritual life increases, they will very naturally fall off. So the master used to give an example of how, with the spiritual progress of an aspirant, the action enjoined on him by the scriptures drop off by themselves. What was the example he used to give? He said, the mother-in-law allows her daughter-in-law to eat all kinds of food and do all manner of work till she conceives. But as soon as she is with child, a little discrimination about food and work begins. Later, as she is in an advanced stage of pregnancy, her work gets extremely limited. The mother-in-law will give very little work. When the daughter-in-law progresses in the pregnancy, when gradually she approaches parturition, when gradually she approaches parturition, she is not given any work at all, lest harm should befall the embryo. And when at last the baby is born, her days are spent only nursing the baby. Similarly, the master's renunciation of external worship and the services of the Divine Mother, now he is the priest, he is the pujari. So all that work, so the services of the Divine Mother, that master's renunciation of the external worship and the services of the Divine Mother, that renunciation took naturally. It was not forced. He was now no more conscious of the proper time for worship and other services. Always immersed in spiritual moods, he served the Universal Mother whensoever and howsoever. There was no time, there was no rules, there was no regulation, because his intensity of devotion to Divine Mother is increased to such an extent that he couldn't do the regular services as enjoined in the scriptures from morning to evening. So now, what was his devotion? How was his devotion? How was the service to the Divine Mother? He was now no more conscious of the proper time for worship and other services. Always immersed in spiritual moods, he served the Universal Mother whenever and howsoever. So he served the Mother whensoever and howsoever he liked. For instances, he sometimes offered food before performing the worship or absorbed in meditation. He forgot completely the idea of his separate existence from her, from the Divine Mother, and decorated his own person with the flowers, sandal paste, etc. What for the worship of the goddess? We were told by the Master himself that on many occasions his action assumed this form because of his constant vision of the Divine Mother inside and outside. So he used to see Divine Mother's presence not only in the external world, in the animals, in the human beings, but all the things of the world. Now, most of the times he used to see Divine Mother within his own self. Many a times we have seen, we have heard, we have read that when Sri Ramakrishna earlier in the beginning stages of sadhana, when he wanted to have the vision of Divine Mother whom he loved so much, he had to cry for her, and then Mother used to come to him, used to go running to the temple like a child, go there and talk to her, plead to her, then she used a vision and talk to him. But after he became immersed in spiritual life and he had gone too much forward, when he wanted to have a vision of the Divine Mother, he need not go to the temple or he need not cry for her. Just he used to go and stand in front of the mirror, or if he had a small mirror, he used to take that mirror and watch himself. He would not see Ramakrishna there. He would not see his own person there. When he used to stand in front of the mirror or take a mirror and look at it, he would not see Ramakrishna or his own body. He used to see Mother Kali. He used to see Divine Mother Durga in the mirror, in the reflection. Because now the Divine Mother started living in his person. So he would not see himself. He had completely obliterated the I. Completely, ego is gone, complete, not even a trace. And he used to see only Divine Mother in himself. So whenever now he wanted to see Divine Mother, he used to just go stand in front of the mirror, or he used to take a mirror and look at it, then he used to see Divine Mother. So that was the intensity of his sadhana, meditating on her and having that vision gone so deep and intense that he had obliterated that I. That's why I tell you again and again, Swami Vivekananda has told what is the essence, what is the summum bonum, what is the result you get after all following all yogas, all the 4 yogas or any religion, any religious path. Swami Vivekananda in Karma Yoga tells the end result is perfect self-abnegation. Perfect self-abnegation. What is that perfect? Self, that is ego. Abnegation. Negation means removal. So removing my ego, the false ego, the identity. Removal of that ego is the aim of spiritual life. Removal of my selfishness is the aim of spiritual life. When I remove that ego and selfishness completely, then what remains? God. You're God. You're the child of God. You're God in your own heart, in your antarayamin. He's the indweller. When you remove the ego, the false thing, when you remove your selfishness, what remains? God only remains, nothing else. So now Ramakrishna in that sadhana, he had removed that ego completely, his identity. And what remained? Divine Mother, nothing else. So whenever he wanted to see Divine Mother, no need of going and crying now. Just go in front of the mirror, he used to see Divine Mother. Whenever and however he used to get that vision at that time, so much of intense devotion. So he is now, because of his constant vision of the Divine Mother inside and outside. We were told by the Master himself, that on many occasions his action assumed this form because of the constant vision of the Divine Mother inside and outside. We were further told that any diminution in his constant experience of the Divine Mother's presence and absorption in her filled him with a poignant sense of separation, which made him throw himself violently on the ground, rub his face against it, and fill the quarters with loud wailings. So in the beginning, now he's not going to think of it. In the beginning of the spiritual life, when he's not having the vision of the mother, so now he will writhe in pain and he used to struggle to have the vision. Once after that, after it became too intense, then he used to see mother all the time. So when would we feel that pain? Any diminution in his constant experience of Divine Mother's presence and absorption in her filled him with a poignant sense of separation, which made him throw himself violently on the ground, rub his face against it, and fill the quarters with loud wailings. He would struggle for life and his breath would almost stop. He could take no notice of the fact that his whole body was getting cut and bruised and covered with blood. You should note that he was not caring for the luxury of his keeping the body very safe and good. When he used to cry for mother, when there was a separation, when Divine Mother's presence and absorption, when there was diminution, when there was the experience that he felt that he is separated from Divine Mother, then what would he do? Filled with the poignant sense of separation, which made him throw himself violently on the ground, rub his face against it, and fill the quarters with loud wailings. He would struggle for life and his breath would stop almost. He could take no notice of the fact that his whole body was getting cut and bruised. It was bleeding. His face was bleeding. His body was bleeding when he used to fall on the ground and rub it against the sand and rub it against the ground, rough ground. So his face would be cut and bruised and it would be bleeding. His whole body was covered with blood. But he was equally unaware whether he stumbled on fire, whether he had fallen on the fire or into water. He was not aware. His only aim was constant vision and experience of Divine Mother. That was the only aim, goal. Whether he has fallen in the fire, whether he has fallen in the water, whether he is having any difficulty or trouble, he is not aware at all. He was equally unaware whether he stumbled on fire or into water. Immediately afterwards, when he again got the vision of the mother, that mental attitude of his vanished. His face then beamed with joy and he became a different person altogether. After all that struggle, when mother was to give the vision, then he used to be just like the child. His face then beamed with joy and he became a different person altogether. Mathur allowed the temple worship to be conducted somehow by the master till the latter reached the state described above. Now his intensity of devotion has increased to such an extent that he cannot perform the job of the priest or the services of the mother in a proper way. So Mathur was noticing, allowed the temple worship to be conducted somehow by the master till the latter reached the state described above. But finding that it was impossible to manage the worship that way anymore, he resolved to make some other arrangement. Hriday said there was a special reason for that resolve of Mathur's. One day, the master suddenly got up from the worshipper's seat in a state of ecstasy and saw Mathur Babu and me in the temple. He then took hold of me by the hand, made me sit on that seat and said to Mathur, Hriday will perform the worship from today. Mother says she will accept his worship in the same manner as mine. So now you can notice the mother or Divine Mother Kali has commanded him, told him. What did she tell? When Mathur and Hriday had come to the temple, when he was in the sanctum, so one day the master suddenly got up from the worshipper's seat in a state of ecstasy and saw Mathur Babu and me, that is Hriday, in the temple. He took hold of me by the hand, that is Hriday, and made me sit on the seat and said to Mathur, Hriday will perform the worship from today. Mother says she will accept his worship in the same manner as mine. The devout Mathur accepted those words of the master as a command of the Divine Mother. We cannot say how far Hriday's words are true, but Mathur knew well that it was impossible for the master to perform the worship and other services daily in that condition of his. We have already said that Mathur's mind was attracted towards the master from the day when he saw him. Since then, he had tried to remedy all his difficulties and keep him on in Dakshineshwar. The more he became acquainted with the master's extraordinary noble qualities, the more was he charmed by them and he served him according to his needs. So then now Mathur started seeing all the divine manifestation in master and he got so much attracted to master, he started serving him in all possible ways. The more he became acquainted with Master Mathur, with the Master's extraordinary noble qualities, the more was he charmed by them. And he served Sri Ramakrishna according to his needs, viewed him with an affectionate eye, and always protected him against unreasonable oppression by others. Now, something goaded him. Something made so much of desire to protect Ramakrishna all the time. It used to be just like a bodyguard, always guarding Ramakrishna from any dangers or anything happenings of the external world. Something made him to do that work, always trying to protect Sri Ramakrishna. Here is an instance. Mathur made arrangements for him to have a daily drink of the syrup of candy. So Mathur had made arrangement to drink the syrup of candy, sugar candy, which is very good for health. It's not the sugar, but they will nicely boil and crystallize it. When you crystallize nicely, boil sugar, then it becomes sugar candy. That sugar candy is used as medicines. So the sugar candy syrup is good for health. So Mathur made arrangements for him, that is Ramakrishna, to have a daily drink of syrup of sugar candy. What is that useful for? It is very good for bile. If there is excess of bile, the pitta, then it is a remedy. Sugar candy is a remedy for that. As he knew that the humor of wind was strong in his body. So this now is being given not for the bile, but something else. So Mathur knew that the humor of the wind was strong, vata, in his body. He protected him from all criticisms and interference by unthinking people when his worship took that unusual turn under the influence of Ragatmika Bhakti. We have elsewhere mentioned a few other examples of this nature, but it seems to us probable that he had doubts in his mind about the master's condition from the day he struck Rani Rasmani by way of teaching her. So now when Ramakrishna struck or slapped Rani Rasmani when she was thinking of the court case, so at that time, Mathur got little doubt about Ramakrishna. Why did he do that? He was very devoted, but a small doubt came into his mind. He protected him from all criticisms and interference by unthinking people when his worship took that unusual turn under the influence of Ragatmika Bhakti. We have elsewhere mentioned a few other examples of this nature, but it seems to us probable that he had doubts in his mind about the master's condition from the day he struck Rani Rasmani by way of teaching her. He concluded that the master was suffering from insanity. Unable to realize the advanced state of the master, he couldn't understand because he was an ordinary householder. He doesn't know anything about sadhana. So that small incident made him think that Ramakrishna might have gone insane. Unable to realize the advanced state of master, the worldly minded Mathur, it seemed, inferred, assumed that there was in him a combination of spirituality and insanity. For he arranged at that time for the master's treatment under Ganga Prasad Sen, a very good Ayurvedic physician, the well-known Ayurvedic physician of Calcutta. He made arrangement for the treatment. He thought that there is some problem. Thinking that the master had a physical disease, Mathur not only made all arrangements for his treatment, but also tried to comfort him by giving reason and arguments so that he might control his mind and proceed with his spiritual practices. We have described for the reader elsewhere how Mathur came to be convinced of the mistake of his estimate of the master after the incident that led to his seeing two China roses, one red and the other white, blossom together on the same twig of a red China rose plant. Knowing that it was impossible for the master to perform the fixed daily services of goddess in the temple, Mathur made another arrangement for it. Ram Tarak Chattopadhyaya, a cousin of the master, had come to the temple in search of a job. He was now appointed to worship the goddess until the master came around. These events came to pass in the year 1853. The master used to call Ram Tarak, his cousin. He was a little elder to him, 1 or 2 years elder. So this Ram Tarak was called as Haladari. The real name of him is Ram Tarak Chattopadhyaya. He was a cousin of Sri Ramakrishna. He was now appointed to worship the goddess until the master came around. The events came to pass in the year 1858. The master used to call Ram Tarak Haladhari. So what is the meaning of Hala? Hala means the plow. Dhari means one who carries it. Who is that who carries the hala or the plow? It is Balarama. You may be knowing Krishna's elder brother, Balarama. His weapon or the one thing he carried was the hala, the plow. That's why Balarama's name is Haladari. So now Ram Tarak, the master used to call this Ram Tarak Chattopadhyaya, his cousin, a little elder to him. as Haladhari. The master told us many things about him on many occasions. Haladhari was a good scholar, he was well read in the scriptures, and a sadhaka. He too was doing spiritual practices, was devoted to the practice of the scripture ordained rituals. He had proficiency in the Bhagavata. He was expert in reading Bhagavata. He was also proficient in Adhyatma Ramayana and other sacred texts and read them daily. He used to read Bhagavata, Adhyatma Ramayana daily. Although he had a greater love of Vishnu than for the Devi, he was a devotee of Lord Vishnu. His devotion to Divine Mother was not so much like he loved Vishnu. He did not feel any hesitation to take charge of the worship of the Divine Mother at the request of Mathur. Though he was a devotee of Vishnu, he didn't have so much of devotion to Divine Mother, but when Mathur requested him, he took up the work of doing the service of Divine Mother there in the temple. But before Haladhari took that charge, Mathur made an arrangement at his request for supplying him with raw foodstuffs so that he might cook for himself. We are told that Mathur at first objected to it and asked, why? Do not Ramakrishna, your cousin, and Hriday, your nephew, take prasad in the temple, the offer to Mother Kali? The intelligent Haladhari replied, my cousin is in an exalted spiritual state. Blemishes will not accrue to him in any way. I am not in that exalted state. I am an ordinary sadhaka, aspirant, spiritual aspirant. It will therefore be reprehensible for me to break my principles regarding food. Mathur was pleased to hear his words. Haladhari took raw provisions and daily cooked them for himself under the Panchavati. Although Haladhari had no aversion to Shakti or Divine Mother, he was not in favor of offering animal sacrifices to goddesses. In India, the animal sacrifices are done to Divine Mother, especially Kali, Durga, or any Divine Mother, they do these animal sacrifices. You go to Kali Ghat, even now you can find people will come just like you take fruits and other offerings, flower offerings, garlands to gods everywhere. In Kali Ghat and other places, they will bring small goat and other things, other animals also to be cut or sacrificed to Divine Mother. Although Haladhari had no aversion to Shakti or Divine Mother, he was not in favor of offering animal sacrifice to the goddess. As it was the rule in the temple to offer animal sacrifice to the Divine Mother at the time of the festivals, special days, he could not perform the worship at those times with joy and zeal. He performed the worship for about a month when it is said, while performing his Sandhya, I have explained what is Sandhya Vandanam. Sandhya is the joining time of the day and the night, or the morning and the evening, there is a noon time. Then evening and night, the evening Sandhya, it's called so Pratha Sandhya morning, then noon Sandhya, Madhyandina Sandhya, then Sayam Sandhya. So that is the joining place of the day, the day and the night, and the night and the day, and the noon and the evening. So that's called Sandhya. At that time, mind will be very calm and quiet. So they make use of it by sitting and doing sadhana at that time, japa, meditation, other things, puja. It's easy to concentrate the mind. So one day he was performing that Sandhya, Haladhari. One day he saw the goddess assume, that now he has a little aversion for all the things of Divine Mother. He was a devotee of Vishnu. He didn't like so much Mother Kali, and he was averse to doing the service of the Mother, giving the sacrifice to Divine Mother. So while you do because it is awakened deity now, if you do the puja in a negligent manner and do not do it properly. So now what happened? He was performing his Sandhya. He had performed the worship of Divine Mother for 1 month. He said while performing his Sandhya one day, he saw the goddess, that is Kali, assume a terrible form. Now Mother Kali was awakened here because he was doing the puja in a negligent manner, and also he was not so in a good state of mind to do the mother's worship. He would not like so much Mother Kali. His love was more towards Vishnu. He had some hatred towards Mother Kali. So in that state, when he was doing the puja, one day during the Sandhya, he saw the goddess assume a terrible form and hear her telling him, "Get up and go away, Haladari. Go away from here. You shall not perform my worship." Get up and go away, Haladari. You should not perform the worship in this negligent manner. You shall not perform the worship. Get up and go away from here. Divine Mother Kali took a very terrible form. Then she also told, "Your son shall die on account of the offense of your irrelevant worship. Your son shall die on account of the offense of your irreverent worship. Because of your irreverent worship, your son shall die on account of that offense." It is said that he received the news of his son's death a few days after this event. He informed the master of all these happenings and from then ceased to worship Divine Mother, the goddess Kali. Therefore, Hriday took up the worship of Kali and Haladari that of Radha Govinda. We heard from this event from Hriday's brother Rajaram about these incidents. So now, these are all the happenings in the life of Sri Ramakrishna at that time. Now we are going to the next chapter, that is the 8th chapter. Now, what is the heading of this chapter? The last part of the story of the first 4 years of sadhana. This is the heading of the chapter. The last part of the story of the first 4 years of sadhana. So 4 years of sadhana, in that it is the last part of the story. When we study the period of the master sadhana, we must first of all remember what he himself told us about it. When we study the period of master sadhana, that is spiritual life, we must first of all remember what he said, what he himself told about it. It will not then be difficult to ascertain its dates. The reader has already been told that we had heard from him that he was engaged in the disciplines of various faiths and doctrines for 12 long years continuously. The reader had already been told that we had heard from him that he was engaged in the disciplines of various faiths and doctrines for 12 long years continuously. Ramakrishna did sadhana for 12 long years continuously. It is ascertained from Rani Rasamani's deed of gift regarding the temple endowment that the Kali temple at Dakshineshwar was consecrated on Thursday, May 31st, 1855. At the end of the same year, the master assumed the office of the priest. It is therefore perfectly certain that the period of his sadhana extends practically from 1856 to 1867. But although this period is clearly ascertained as a period of his sadhana, we shall see that he went on a pilgrimage to some holy places towards the end of this period and engaged himself in sadhana there and again at Dakshineshwar after his return. So this is the life of the sadhana. Shardanandaji Maharaj is trying to ascertain the dates chronologically by taking in all the different facts of that period, because there is endowment done by the Rani when the temple was consecrated. So if you started at the end of that year, so from that time, the 12 years will be up to 1855. The 12 continuous long years, that is from 1856 to 1867, Sri Ramakrishna engaged himself in intense sadhana. We proceed to divide this period of 12 years into 3 divisions, each of which we are to study separately. First, there are the 4 years from 1856 to 1859, the main events of which we have already studied now. Next, an equal number of years from 1860 to 1863 are spent under the instruction of the Brahmani in the practice of all disciplines of 64 main tantras. So now Bhairavi Brahmani, one aspirant was expert in not only the Vaishnava scriptures, she was also expert in the Tantra scriptures, the Divine Mother worship, the sadhanas of Divine Mother. So 64 tantras. So in India, in the Gurukulas, they used to teach the 64 Vidyas. Like that here, similar to that, in the Tantras, you have to do the practices. 64 Tantras, different Tantras are there, main Tantras. So they are all Vidyas. You have to do that sadhana and get those experiences. So they are 64 in number. So it's called 64 main Tantras. So he practiced all these 64 Tantras under the Guru, that is Bhairavi Brahmani, a lady he accepted, Divine Mother. He accepted that mother, the lady Bhairavi Brahmani, as his Guru, and under her guidance, he did all these Vaishnava sadhanas, some of the Vaishnava sadhanas, and this sadhana of Tantras. Thirdly, he spent a period of equal length lasting from 1864 to 1867 in the practice of the following sadhanas. He was initiated in the mantra of Rama by a monk of the Ramavat denomination named Jatadhari and got the image of Ramalala. He was then engaged in sadhana in a woman's apparel during this period of 6 months in order to realize the spiritual attitude of a female friend of God, spoken of in the Vaishnava books. He also received the Vedic Mahavakya from Totapuri and attained to the Nirvikalpa plane of consciousness. And lastly, he was taught the religion of Islam by one Islamic proponent. During the period of these 12 years, he practiced the discipline of the Sakhya Bhava. According to the Vaishnava scripture, Sakhya Bhava means considering God as your friend. So in Sakhya Bhava, according to the Vaishnava scriptures, and came in contact with the secondary Vaishnava denomination of Karta Bhaja, Navarasika, etc. That he was closely acquainted with these denominations is very clear from the fact that Vaishnava Charan Goswami and other sadhakas followed these faiths, came to the master for spiritual help. If we divide the period of his sadhana into the 3 divisions mentioned above and consider the matter deeply, we shall find that there is a clear difference in the nature of the sadhanas of the first division from those of the other 2. So now chronologically, Sharadanandaji Maharaj is dividing the 12 years of Sri Ramakrishna. So what were the other different practices? What were the different paths? The Vaishnava, the Tantra, the Advaita, the Islamic, the Christian, everything he performed. All the different paths to reach God. So he did the sadhanas during this period, these 12 long years, incessantly and continuously. And we will study all of them. Now just to divide, he has Sharadanandaji Maharaj has given this division of the sadhana of 12 years. The first, the second, the third, and in the last, what were all the different sadhanas. So next, we will go on seeing in detail what are all the sadhanas he did. Now he has got the highest experience of Divine Mother. Then after that, he wanted to enjoy, he wanted to see the other different aspect of God in different ways, how people worship, how God is seen in formless aspect. In Islam, they worship God formless but with attributes. In Advaita, they have gone still higher. What is that Advaita Vedantic way? It is formless and attributeless, beyond those things. So Nirakara Nirguna Parabrahma. But in Islam, it is Nirakara Saguna Parabrahma. So likewise, Saguna, Sakara, with form, with attributes. So many other different varieties, so many other different paths. He wanted to see how God would be, how would God give them darshan experiences. So he went through all the sadhanas, whatever was there from the time of the beginning of humanity up till now. What were all the sadhanas? What were all the spiritual practices to reach God? All of them were practiced by Sri Ramakrishna. He wanted to see. And then he found the truth. Everything, every sadhana, whatever sadhana you take up, will lead to the same one God. The same God. There is no difference. Whether you go to through the Christianity or Islam or any other religion, any other this thing, from the lowest to the highest, the important thing is only your sincerity, your earnestness to realize God. So Ramakrishna did all these things. And what is the result? He found that it leads one to the same God. There is no separate God. You may call him by any name, you may follow any paths, just like different rivers starting from different places. They go straight or crooked or go round the way on the land flow, and then finally they reach the one ocean. Likewise, whichever path you may take, whatever way you may do the spiritual sadhana, important thing is your sincerity and earnestness, vyakulata. So where will it lead it? It leads to the one same God. So to prove that, that was not the intention of Sri Ramakrishna, but that was a side effect, collateral thing which happened. So his intention was he wanted to enjoy and see how God is, what are the different ways, where will it take to? And he did all the sadhanas. Then he found the result that it leads to just one God. So one God who is appearing to different people as different, that's all. So now, what is the end result? We have come to know that we should not quarrel in the name of God because it's the same God to whom all the aspirants are going to. Okay? Because now we have finished our time, we will end our conversation. We will continue the same discussion tomorrow. In more detailed way, we can see what are all the spiritual practices Sri Ramakrishna is undergoing now and take the help to our own spiritual sadhanas. We will get guidance from these things. So we shall see all this discussion tomorrow, that is Friday. So now it's the time for question and answer, or if there are any doubts to be cleared, you can ask any questions if you have. If you have any questions, if you have any doubts on today's discussion, you can ask.
Maharaj, Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste, Madhu. Please tell.
It's not about today's discussion, but in general, what is the difference between Japam and meditation, Maharaj?
Japa is another type of meditation made easy. All cannot meditate. Meditation is a very high state. We are all trying to meditate. Nobody has reached the state of meditation. Nobody can reach it. It's a very, very high state. Only experts who have done a lot of sadhana can reach the state of meditation. So japa is nothing but by repetition, just like Ramakrishna gives the example. Suppose now you have a log of wood. Now in olden days, the transportation of wood was by putting them into the rivers, just like Ganga will start from Himalaya. So the Nepali government and the other kings, they want to sell their wood. They cut the wood and put it into the river. The river will float. The wood logs will float. Then here at Calcutta, the British company would collect it and stop it tight with a chain and then put it to the ships and transport it to England. That was the way. So now the log of wood, big woods would be immersed in Ganga, Mother Ganga. So how will they now protect it or keep it? They would tie them with a chain so that it would not be carried away into the ocean by the river. So now suppose now all the logs of wood are immersed in Ganga, you can't see it. How will that person go and reach that log of wood? Now Ramakrishna used to tell that that log of wood can be considered or compared to God. And we who want to search or find out that log of wood is spiritual aspirant. What is the way out? Now you have to catch hold of the chain. The chain has so many links. You know the chain, there will be links like that, 1, 2, 3, the chain will be connected through that links. So now if you go on catching hold of that link one by one and go forward, then you can easily reach that log of wood, which is hidden, you can't see it. Likewise, God is now at present very far off, is not very near to us, we do not know, he is not seen. So now this, you want to find out God, which is like that wood, how can you go forward? So japa is like that link of chain. Now if you catch hold of that link of the chain one by one chain, another chain, it will lead you to God. Likewise, this japa, repetition of the name of God, is like that link of the chain. If you go on doing japa, it will take you to God. So this was the example given by Ramakrishna. So while doing japa, you are not just only repeating the name of the Lord. Suppose your name is Madhusudan Jauhar. So when I repeat the name of Madhusudan Jauhar, I will not go on thinking what is Madhu. Madhu means honey, or Sudana. Madhusudana means there was one demon called Madhu long back and Lord Krishna killed him. So when he killed that demon Madhusudan, he got the name Madhusudan. Sudana means one who was destroyed. So I don't go on thinking all those things. The moment I repeat the name of Madhusudan Jauhar means your picture will come to my mind. Likewise, when you take the name of Lord, japa, you do the japa, that deity or Ishtadevata's picture will come to your mind. So when you are repeating it again and again, that picture comes, and just like the cinematography, in olden days, how would they do that cinematography? There would be different reels. Every reel will be showing now it is digital. In olden days, I'm talking about the olden days cinema. There would be reel. In that reel, there would be the thousands and thousands of different reels which are showing different motion. When it is constantly played, then continuously played, then that becomes a movie. It will become a complete picture. You can see that continuous flow of that reels will be projected on the screen. It looks like as if the person is completely moving, and every motion looks like a natural movement and everything. Likewise, the continuous repetition of the name japa will bring in the picture of the Lord in your heart, and that is meditation. So japa is a help to meditation. So while doing japa, you are not only taking the name of the Lord, continuously you are also thinking of the Lord. Just like the moment I utter Madhusudan, then I immediately remember you, the picture comes to me. Likewise, when you repeat the name of the Lord, the picture of the Lord should come in my heart, and meditation also will be continuously done. That is japa. So japa and meditation are one and the same. So japa will lead to meditation. It's help to meditation. That's all. I think I have answered your question.
Okay, Maharaj.
Okay. Any other questions or doubts on spiritual subject or sadhana? Okay, we will close today's discussion with the mantra. Om Priyatam Pundarikakshaha Sarvayagneshwaro Harihi Tasmin Tushte Jagat Tushtam Prenite Prenitam Jagat Harihi Om Tatsat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Namaskar to all of you. Jai Shri Ramakrishna. Om Namo Narayanaya. We will meet tomorrow, same time, early in the morning. Then we have Saturday, we have the Bhagavad Gita class in the evening. Sunday and Monday, again, we have the same discussion of Great Master. Then there will be children's class for on Hinduism and Sanskrit class too at the time. Then in the evening 4:15 we have the satsang program. Then Monday evening we have the puja class, the science of worship. Tuesday we have Vivek Chudamani, the crucible of discrimination. Wednesday again we have in the evening Bhagavad Gita, discussion of the second chapter, 59th verse. All are welcome to all this discussion. Thank you. Namaste. Jai Ramakrishna. Om Namo Narayana.